is the our Board of Education Finance Committee meeting. I call this meeting to order. I appreciate your attending. There's a note out there to the visitors we have. We moved the venue. We understood there would be a lot, and we're glad that was a good call to do that because we got a lot of good visitors. I would ask, this is our work session, and while it's open in the sense that you could certainly come look at the work that we do, as we have all of our meetings are open and you can come, it's non-participatory. So we would ask that you would just jot notes down, and after the meeting you can certainly ask us any questions or anything like that, and turn phones on if you can or something like that. But I fully expect we'll have a good meeting here. So I appreciate each of you guys for coming today, and we'll get started on our meeting. All right. Board members, we've got Mr. Collins, Mr. Crowder, Mr. Scholl, Mr. Hodges, and myself, and we do have a duly constituted quorum. At this time, you've seen the minutes for the March 27th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Mr. Crowder, is there a second? Second by Mr. Hodges. All in favor, say aye. The minutes are approved. Basically, what we are tasked with is our recommendation was presented to the board for discussion at the last meeting, the last Board of Education meeting. Dr. Davis and staff presented this Finance Committee Superintendent's recommendation, and there was a lot of discussion, a lot of information received about that, a lot of feedback, and I think the board has tasked us with another look at, and I guess mainly concerns with the teachers' assistants being cut and the plan and the funding request. And I was going to try and go over one thought, and then Dr. Davis was going to present one, and basically what I was going to do is see if I could put up here, bear with me on here. I think and I'm going to use some round numbers here, our current expense that we asked for in the first thing was 2.2, and this was the current expense, and then we had basically $9 million in capital. That comes to 11.2. I certainly understand, and I know the board has as well, gotten a tremendous amount of feedback that there's something we can do about the TA program that we can mitigate that in some fashion or form. One thought would be that we could reduce some of this capital, put it up into here in our request, and basically it would break out in terms of the 2.2 here. The shortfall that we need, Dan, is, if this is correct, is 6.7 for the TA program. And then reduce this down to 4 million for the capital. What that comes up with is 13 million, or 12.9. That would be the 12.9. And so that difference here is, what's that, 1.7? That would be a 1.7 difference in terms of the total funding. And basically, what we would be doing is asking the county commissioners for 8.9 on current expense. And that would be basically an additional request of about 1.7, revising our capital and taking off the CFP, and it really cuts into our capital. But what it does is allow us to do this. My concern, deep concern, is that the local is picking up a state component here. In terms of recurring expenses, I think that's a very dangerous thing. When the state rolls down, and I'm not against decentralizing educational delivery from the state down to us, but there has to be a corresponding funds that roll down with it as well. And if we ask the county for this program, then this is historically the state funding component of it, and we're picking it up locally without any additional funds. And it's a very dangerous thing, because I don't think they would ever pull us back. And from a state standpoint, next time they're not rolling down people, they're rolling down things like the school buses and things like that, which are non-controversial items, and nobody's going to scream and holler for school buses, but it absolutely impacts our bottom line. And so for me, this is a very dangerous precedent, but this is clearly what the people want in terms of our funding request. And in order to make this the priority, we can cut back on capital. And this is one component of that. The thought is this 2.2, the basis of it came from what we talked about was inflation and growth. And to make sure that the growth was not disputed, it was growth from last year. We didn't have to figure what, 688, Dan, is that right?
Sir, 688 students, which included growth from
16
last year to this year. And that 610 is not accurate.
Okay.
That actually is the projection of next year's growth that DPI provided for us.
Okay. But this is the breakdown and includes the charter.
From last year to this year.
year.
The concern I have, of course, is that growth is going to be over 700 next year.
Right, that's right.
And then we were capped at $2.2 million on the current expense, and inflation is where I had to adjust downwards. So the inflation would have actually been a whole lot
And
more.
it's a lot more than what that is.
Absolutely.
Well, and again, we're talking numbers here, round numbers for easy and everything. Part of this, where we would go with this is, I think it was 1.2. This is broken out into 1.2 for increased expenditures. Is that correct?
The last number we had presented, which was at the Board of Education meeting, the last full Board of Education meeting, we had said that the ADM student growth funding would be $1,332,161, which is, of course, low. And then we said that inflation on consumables would be $867,839. And if we just do the inflation based on reality of the last 12 months, we'd be talking about nearly $1.1 million.
Okay. The board member, committee members, you guys understand what I'm talking about, this roll down effect in here. And I would still propose, as part of this, that we still continue on with the plan that Dr. Davis presented in creating a new entity. What I would assume is that there is about 4.5 million, I think is what we said,
4.8.
or was it 4.8 that was distributed to the schools?
Yes, sir. There was 4.8 distributed to the schools, And I believe we have an additional 150,000 that we held back because we don't know where the growth is going.
Okay.
So we have a little bit more to distribute later.
Just again, in terms of the big picture, this is going to the schools. If we request the county commissioners to pick up that component, this would feed into that. It would fully fund the program. But my recommendation would be to continue on with the program in terms of the reconstituting the program, so that if and this decreases in the future, it would have a component of that. There's already a mechanism to take care of that. And I love the flexibility given to the schools. That philosophically, for me, is a good component of that. Another component of this presentation, or this idea, this scenario, would be that right now we have about a $2 million additional discretionary cut that's coming up from the state. We went from 11.5 to 13.5 coming up from the state. Is that correct, Dan? Our discretionary cut for this next budget year?
It's actually slated to be almost 2.1 million. It certainly represents at least, I believe we calculated it as at least 40 teaching positions, which would of course also equate to potentially 80 teacher assistant positions, because teacher assistants cost about half of a teacher.
Teacher is about 2 to 1. Round numbers, let's say 2. Here's the point I'm trying to make. If there is talk in the state that the delegation is going to try and work to get this mitigated, so that this additional cut does not come back. One thought is, if the state mitigates this, in other words, they don't ask for this cut back, and we get, if the county funds the TA, as part of this would be that the county would get whatever they pick up on. In other words, if the county picks up the state's component here, and then we don't realize this additional cut, what I would say is we would apply this $2 million back to the county, because they're picking up the state's component of that to the degree. And if they mitigate this cut to only $1 million, then there would only be $1 million coming back to you. But my thought is that we still go forward with the reconstituted teacher assistant program. And if this is funded by the commissioners, then there would be additional funds available to the school to do that. We would mitigate this back. The concern is this right here on the capital side. So this is one scenario. Dr. Davis, and this is an alternate one. If you want to raise all of this.
Yeah, there's some points I have where I agree with Mr. Arp, some points I see a different way too. I hope everybody got this down, because I ain't going to raise it so I can write up what I'm proposing. And of course, this is just for discussion, and I think the board can make a decision, or the committee can make a decision on what to recommend to the board. I'll go through these one at a time. First of all, on capital outlay, our current request, I think Mr. Art represented it as $9 million. I'll use 8.9. It's 8 and some. I'm trying to mark it right. Well, Dean used red. I'm going to be optimistic. Okay. Capital request is 8.9. What I would recommend that we do this year in our operating budget, we have $79.3 million, and we got 0 capital last year. But we took $2.5 million out of that and designated it to capital spending. So that's really minus 2.5. I would recommend that we take 1.5 from that, put over here, and then we ask the commissioners for $7.4 million in capital funding. And we would still be able to fully fund our $8.9 million request. So that would be our capital request, $7.4 million. The $4 million, we can make that work if we had to. I would rather us ask for what we need. And because we've kicked the can down the road, we really have a comprehensive facilities plan that asks for, Dr. Webb, how many millions of dollars in that for each year? About 20 million per year?
Created a $90 million comprehensive facilities plan.
Yeah.
The study was a $200 million. The study vetted down to $90 million of needed work for the school system.
And we know asking for 20 million is not realistic. And, you know, I'm not sure how realistic 8.9 million is. We need to ask. We need to advocate for what our needs are. And we can tell the commissioners we can mitigate that down because we did it last year. Now, there's another $1 million here, and I'm going to show you what I want to propose to do with that in a minute. On what expense, Mr. Arp and I agree on that. We are asking for 2.2, and I would recommend we stick with that. But I would like to take another $1 million here. And this is not something we have to ask commissioners permission for. This is something the board would have to decide. We don't have to get operating funds for capital. But we take $1 million of that, and that would give us 3.2 million. 2 million would take care of our increased cost and would fund a $500 supplement for all teachers. They've not had a raise in 4 years. They deserve that, in my opinion. $500 supplement. And it would just be across the board $500. Right now, our supplements range anywhere from about $1,500 to $2,500. That's a rough number, but
That's correct.
and you know, Charlotte Mecklenburg's paying $4,000 to $6,000, $7,000. You know, Cabarrus County. These are the people we compete with for teachers, and it's particularly true in some parts of the county. You know, where it's not that far for a teacher to go. You know, teaching in one part of the county just to cross the line and teach in, you know, a school with the same demographics. Whether they cross into Mecklenburg or Cabarrus would pay the slightly higher supplement, not as much. But that's what I would recommend on the local current expense. On the teacher assistants, the TA program, I hope everybody understands the rationale and the reasoning behind the TA thing. It's not something I wanted to do, but we're down to the choice between that and the cutting the teachers, and we don't want to do that. And you know, we've all heard the talk about other things we could use money for, and we know that that money has to be used for the purposes it's being used for. And it's money for this year, not for next year. We're talking about next year's money. And so I have a lot of trepidation too about asking the commissioners to fund something that's really a state responsibility. This has not been a local responsibility. I think that, you know, it's a slippery slope and a path that we're starting to go down that might have some unintended consequences down the road. But with that said, I'm smart enough to know that you know, this is what the public's asking for, and I think we don't know until we ask. And so I would recommend that we ask for the 6.7 also. Now, my preference would be, rather than just saying all teacher assistants have a job, to keep the current program in place and give the schools basically full funding equal to what they have. Let them decide whether they want to hire teachers or teacher assistants. Because teachers are in need too. What's been lost in this is we're still losing 53 teaching positions. And so if you keep that flexibility for the schools to hire teachers and or teacher assistants, that they would still have basically the same amount of funding on an ADM basis they had this year. It's just their staffs may look a little different. And my guess is that a lot of schools would hire back a lot of their TAs, but maybe not all of them. And in some situations, they might combine some positions, because in some they might take a couple of TA positions and turn them into a teacher position, because they really need another second-grade teacher, or they really need, you know, another person to help in this area or that area. So I'd like to keep that flexibility in place. I too agree with Mr. Arp that the state mitigates us on the discretionary cut. I think we've got a responsibility to the citizens of Union County to give that money back to the county commissioners. So, and I have heard some talk that this additional discretionary cut of $2 million is going to possibly not happen. I think they're working really hard to see if they can make that happen. They don't know, and they won't know until all the tax revenues are in and they see what all their needs are. But I think we need to say to the commissioners, we'll give that money back. Whatever the number is, whether it's 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, all the way up to the 6.7. Now, if they don't fully fund this, I think we have to have another discussion on that. You know, if they don't fully fund it, you know, let's say they only fund half of it, and we get 2 million back, well, do we give any back, or do we take that and add to it so we can come closer to fully funding this? I think that's a discussion that the board, this committee needs to have. My recommendation would be to only pay it back if they fully fund it. If they fully fund it, then we'll pay that. That would be my recommendation. Of course, I know that there has to be some discussion on that. Yes.
There's kind of clarify one thing, I want to make sure I understand it. The 79.3, of course, is what we got this year.
Yeah.
I guess technically, we would be looking at, all this applies, but really what the request would be
79.3 plus
2.2.
Yes.
79.3 plus 2.2 plus 6.7.
Plus 6.7.
Okay, and that would total up to, I believe, 88.2.
That sounds about right.
Okay, and then on the capital side, what we'd be looking at is 7.4. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure, I think that clarifies it for the public as well. So this is 88.2, right, that's the answer. Yeah.
88.2 on local current expense. And, you know, I'm not trying to create a preconceived notion, but, I mean, it is foreseeable. You know, whether this would recur or not, I don't know. You know, I don't know whether the commissioners are in a position to give that on a recurring basis. They may be for a while, but I don't know if they are. And, you know, in some ways, folks, we're kicking the can down the road. This is a state issue. If the state doesn't resolve it, we're going to be right back here in the same situation next year. So, you know, do we want to deal with it now, or do we want to deal with it later? Or do we want to deal with it a little bit at a time? You know, we used the edge jobs money to get us over the hump, and that bought us another year. This will buy us another year.
One of the things is that if we can outline the priorities of the increase and make sure everybody understands, we would have 2 million, we would have 1.2 going to increased expenses. We would have 2 million going to teacher supplement raise.
Well, Dan, aren't those numbers closer to 1.6 and 1.6? Isn't it about 1.6 for a $500 raise?
Yeah, if you want the exact number, I can provide that.
I think
It would
the breakdown
be
is a
near,
little different.
I would say
Yeah.
1.7, the nice round numbers.
I'm sorry?
I would say, if you round up, it would be 1.7 to make sure we have enough. I want to make sure we have enough for the growth. I am concerned about that growth factor because DPI has been wrong in their projections.
Okay, so.
Well, it's a guessing game at this point.
So we,
Yes. 1.7.
1.7 is what we would use for the supplement increase.
Yes, sir.
At 500.
Yes.
And so that would leave
Average.
1.5 to deal with our
It's
increased
average,
costs, right?
Yes, it
Average
is.
supplement increase of $500. Okay, and that's where we get the 3.2 from.
Right, that's the 3.2.
And then the 6.7 is the TA program.
Of course, we're really only asking for 2.2 there because we're going to take 1 million from our current operating.
But that's where it would be spent.
Yes, that's where it'd be spent. And then the 6.7 would be spent on the instructional support program, the elementary learning.
As part of the 7.4, we would go back to the same level we have here. And that,
Those are, you got those outlined up in what you gave us earlier, correct?
that includes the technology, the maintenance capital, and the CFP.
Yes,
And
it's
the
buses,
buses.
it's maintenance buses,
And the buses.
technology, and company's facility. So, I will tell you, I am not married to this. It's whatever you guys want to do. This is what I recommend. Our recommendation is slightly different. So I think
Got a question?
Sure.
Would you, Dr. Davis, would you brief history on the TAs being paid by the state? What's the trend over the last couple 5 years? They fund them fully? this a part of the,
Dan might can speak to that as better as well as I could. They fund them, but it's been, that and the teacher allotment's been the area where most districts have had to go for the discretionary cut, because that's the hugest part of your allotment. You know, just like I said the other night in my presentation, it's unrealistic to expect the state to balance its budget without touching public education. It's unrealistic to expect us to do the discretionary cut without touching the classroom. And school, and we've stayed away from that for the most part up to this point. But that's where we are now.
Specifically, Dr. Davis, last year, because our discretionary cut, it was $11.5 million. We had to hand back $8.7 million for the teachers and $2.8 million of teacher assistants. So, no, they didn't fully fund it.
Right.
We had to hand it back.
Yeah, we've already.
are they position allotments or dollar?
Well, teachers are position allowance, but teacher assistants are dollar allowance.
When we give back, we got a set average that we can calculate, convert those positions to dollar allotments, and that's how we make up the cut to give back to the state. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, sir. It certainly is advantageous in Union County to hand back teaching positions. And first and foremost, we don't have a choice. But second of all, because we have been afforded the ability to buy some locally paid teachers, if we hand back a position allotment and they give us $55,000 for it, and we hire a lower paid teacher because of their experience and only pay $45,000 for it, just nice round numbers, we make $10,000 on that. And we do that a lot. That is a big part of what my staff does to make a buck. If you take 2 dimes and make a quarter.
And that's
We do that all day long.
every school district in the state does that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
that's
just
the
what
way
we
that-
have to do, but it is advantageous
county
to
works.
us when we have younger teachers.
That's how we're able to leverage that and get more cuts back to the state on the reversion. It's basically how
Get
we're
more
able
credit for
to
what
get
we
more
do.
credit for it.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Mr. Crowder.
Well, I listened to the discussion, and our purpose is to make sure that children in Union County have an opportunity to get a good education. And I remember when the teacher assistance program started, and our test scores have continued to grow ever since then. Now, if we just cut off the teacher assistants, my prediction is that our test scores will drop like a rock. And because even now, there are more things the teacher assistants are doing that they didn't do when we first started. Most of those schools would do that kind of thing. But now, they're taking children and changing them, and you have accidents, they take care of that, and teachers go to work. Now, I think that the teacher assistance program is one of the basics in our school system. And the next thing I think that we need to ask the county commission what we need, and make sure that the children are treated fairly and have an opportunity. And if we do that, I think we'll be all right. I think the county commission, when the emails and contacts that I've had public, that's the way they see it, and that's what they want us to do. And it's not political to me. I've been on the school board for 30 years, so there's no politics in it at all. I'm doing the perfect job. They're strictly for children. So, might be my last thing.
Well, I agree that we need to ask the county commission for the money for the teachers' assistants or the positions in the schools. I do like the plan that offers the school, the individual school, the autonomy to decide how they want their hands, whether those hands are teachers or whether those hands are teachers' assistants. So for me, it's the people. I don't want to lose the positions of the people. Whether the school decides that they want it as a teacher or 2 teachers' assistants or however they want, I think that they should have the autonomy and the control in their community to be able to do that with their site-based team and their principal. But I think that we have to ask the county commission to fund the 6.7 for the TA program or whatever is going to be reconstituted to be. And I think that it is vital that we ask for them to have a $500 supplement because we've got to do right by all the teachers. I mean, we are K through 12 system. We're not a K through 2. And the high school and the middle school teachers, they are working just as hard. They are strapped with so many things. Very different than the elementary school, but still just as much. So, you know, it's time for us to step up and support these people who've been doing, I mean, they're the core of the success of our system. These teachers that are doing it all, and we need to say, oh, it's a shame we can't do more, but we need to say, at least this is a small pat on the back by doing the $500 supplement. As far as the capital, I agree with Dr. Davis. I absolutely think that we need to ask for whatever we need on the capital side and fund what we need to do in schools. The expense fund, you know, between the inflation rate and the growth, I'm deferring to Mr. Karpinski as to, are we asking for enough on that end?
If I may, Mr. Arndt, inflation is difficult, and it depends on how you calculate it, of course, but just 1 year's worth of inflation is about $1.1 million. You know, the problem is we have had flat funding and or reduced funding from the county while our students have increased tremendously. And 3 years worth of inflation would be at least $3.5 million, and that's not not compounded inflation. That's just taking 1 year, computing the inflation rate on consumables, and then taking another year and applying it on consumables, and then taking another year on consumables. So that number is $3.5 or $6 million. And certainly if we did it with a compounding effect, it would be over $4 million. Everything's more expensive. And what's really driving this is the fact that everything takes more money to deliver. So vendors are passing that cost on to us. We all see it on a daily basis that we go to the gas station, gas prices go up. Well, what happens is that turns around, increases our consumable prices.
So I think that, you know, I guess it could be argued that that funding could be asked for more, but we're not, you know, we're proposing to put our money in the people, the money that we're asking for in the county, from the county commission. You know, I agree. I think our big lobby here has got to be with the state to do away with these discretionary cuts because it's killing us. And I feel like we're kind of revisiting where we were last year with the EduJobs money. You know, there wasn't anybody in the school system that didn't know that the EduJobs money was saving their job for 1 year. And that money was going to go away after a year. We had the opportunity this year to ask for the money from the county commission. But like Dr. Davis said, I mean, this could be another 1 year opportunity. So it still falls back on being able to lobby the state to do away with those discretionary cuts. I very much support the plan that is up on the board right now. I think that it would be unrealistic to think that we are going to send this plan and that we're going to get a rubber stamp and a gold star and here you go, have at it. So I think we've got to start here and hope that they're going to fund us to what we need.
All right. In agreement with this plan, a couple things I think we're not going to ask for would be the additional inflation, which is crucial. It is an expense, a real expense. And the expected growth of 700-ish students come August. Those are real kids that are going to hit our classrooms next year that we're not going to get funded for until next year. So we're going to be in arrears on that. So we can agree on this one. It appears good. Any cuts to our TA program or the classroom program, we're not going to see those results for another who knows how many more years, but they're not going to be an instant showing of that test results immediately. Everybody, there's many studies out there that show that if a student can't read by the 3rd grade, this is the crucial years of K3, that if they can't read, they're struggling the rest of their career. So we really need to make sure we do what we can to get the K3 students and not diminish their education. But reading is crucial for them at that age. And, therefore, I'm pretty much in agreement with this plan as well.
Just to summarize this would be a capital request of 7.4 and a current expense request of, what's that, 8.9? Am my math right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I get that as a total of 95.6.
It's an increase of 16.3, I believe, total. Right? Yeah, it is.
And also, Chairman Arp, I think that I also really agree with Dr. Davis in saying that if the state comes back better than projected, and they're projecting that they're going to come back better than they had originally projected, that if that is the case, that we absolutely return the money back to the county. Because that's just the right thing to do. And it shows the prudence of the system. And I think that needs to be clearly communicated to them, that would be the intention.
Everybody understand Dr. Davis's recommendation?
This will be voted on after we vote on it now.
Well, probably come out of here first in terms of making a recommendation to the full board. That this is what will be presented to the board.
The total request is 95.6.
Yes, broken out into the an increase on the operating side of 2.2, 6.7 for the TA program, and that's an increase which is 8.9 increase on the local current expense.
I guess you're going to add the 8.9 to the 79.3.
Right.
At 88.2.
88.2.
And you're at 7.4 to that.
Yeah.
95.6.
And that's the 95.6. And that fully funds the capital request, which is broken into 3 components: the technology, the regular maintenance, and the CFP. That's the components of the capital request. Oh, and the transportation. mitigating that with the 2.5 million that we were hit on the capital last year.
We're putting 1.5 into our capital and 1 into the teacher salary.
Is there a motion to the superintendent's recommendation?
So moved.
Ms. Hodges, is there a second? Second by Mr. Ralph. All those in favor signify by raising the hand of recommending this to the full board. Raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any other? Aye. That covers all of it, right? All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.